Harriet is the film about the famed late 19th century heroine, early 20th century heroine, Harriet Tubman, and her struggle to leave her home in Maryland, travel 100 miles to freedom, and then to come back and do it multiple times and freeing hundreds of slaves in the process. The film is fantastic. It's great for the whole family. It's thought-provoking, and we're going to talk about it right now.
Until this monster called slavery is dead. Ready?
So my name is Kyle, and if you are unfamiliar with the way I do my movie reviews, please check out the link right here, and I'll give you a quick summary as to how it all works. And as always, I will leave a spoiler note below in case you do not want to know anything about the movie before you see it. So Harriet is a film starring Tony Award-winning actress Cynthia Erivo, and the director is Casey Lemons, and the screenplay is written by Gregory Allen Howard, who brought us Remember the Titans. The film talks about the story of Harriet Tubman at an early age and her path to freedom and her path back to getting the people, her loved ones particularly, back to freedom with her. And she did this many, many, many times and freed many, many, many people. That number is in debate, but most people think it's in the hundreds. And so this film is dear to me because Harriet Tubman has always been a childhood hero of mine, and being from her home state of Maryland, it definitely is something that I have been looking forward to seeing for many, many years. I read 2 books on Harriet Tubman, and her history is mythical because there's not a lot of history written about her early on in her growing up. There's stories and there's a lot of oral traditions, but this movie did a really good job of bringing those pieces together in a way that I think honors her, her memory, her family, and her legacy. So even though Harriet spares you the brutality of slavery, unlike 12 Years a Slave, which absolutely doesn't care about your feelings, it just shows it to you, this one is rated PG-13, which means you can watch it with your family. But that does not diminish the emotional impact in the way that families are torn apart, and you see the effects of slavery. You see the effects of being lied to and being thought of as less than human and being treated as property. That is front and foremost. And so for that, I give Harriet a 7 for emotional impact. So for the intangibles, the major thing about Harriet, which makes this movie so good, is the fact that the acting is just superb. They went out and got actresses and actors that we may not know. So it doesn't take you away from the movie if you see an actor like, let's say, Denzel Washington, who you obviously know, and you see him, well, that kind of takes you out of the movie. Well, no, these actors and actresses are people that we may not be too familiar with. And so, Cynthia Erivo does a really good job playing the lead actress. She's a British actress. She is a Tony Award-winning actress. In fact, another actor, Joe Alwyn, who plays the abolitionist leader who helps her to escape, also is a Tony Award winner. So Harriet has a cast that is phenomenal. The portrayals are amazing. Cynthia does a really good job portraying who I would think Harriet Tubman is. She is a vulnerable person. She has emotions. She has feelings. She's not just this superhero that just does what she wants to do and takes names and doesn't look back. She is a real person who has real motivations, who has people she cares for, and is hurt by people. And she is someone who has an arc, okay? Unlike some Mary Sues we see today, she is not a Mary Sue. She is a real person who has flaws, who trusts people, maybe she shouldn't, and is disappointed by people, but yet she struggles through that, and through her faith in God is what actually gets her through this, which I feel is really good. This movie, in some ways, is a throwback to other eras of film, which I'll talk about later. And so I give Harriet a 7 for intangibles. So for the category of watchability, I give Harriet a 7 because I love history, and this makes me want to go back and revisit the story over and over and over again and share it with as many people as possible because it's a positive message. It's a spiritual message, which I find extremely refreshing. So before I talk about my overall impression, I want to first say what Harriet is. Harriet is a biopic, a story about a woman, a very strong woman who would not take no for an answer. She was determined. She was smart. She was courageous. and she had help from other people, but it just allowed her to be the person she was when you add into the notion that she had a higher power looking after her. So you combine those elements together. This film takes that timeline of her life from about 1848 all the way up to around the Civil War period. That time period of this film covers that. And so this is a span of that, and it's a narration of that. And so for that, this movie is a 7. It is not trying to be anything other than that. It is trying to give honor to Harriet Tubman and the people of the Underground Railroad who allowed many slaves to break the bondage of slavery. And in doing so, it made the South really angry. Some of these people were really upset because they were taking away their livelihood. And this was the beginning of the breakdown of the slave movement here in America. And many people take credit with that. But Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad play a huge part in that. And so I believe because of that, this film does a really good job of showing that as a narration type of film. Is not trying to have huge arcs and huge set pieces, but it is something that is what it is. And I think because of that, I give Harriet a 7. Now we're on to my conservative take, and I want to talk about this quickly. There will be a spoiler note below so that you will not be spoiled from this. So the thing about Harriet is this, and I believe this film is an absolute throwback to the 90s, the early 2000s, when you can make films like this, where you have a black female who is going against the current narrative of gun control and anti-God. Well, Harriet Tubman was not that. She carried around a pistol with her and used it to full effect to get what she wanted, to save lives, to keep the mission going. Harriet Tubman also was a strong Christian believer, and she was led by faith through him and what she felt he was telling her at critical times. She had an ailment, a brain damage condition, that because of an injury she took to the head as an early child caused her to faint spontaneously at any point in time. And it had to have made for some very stressful moments. Can you just imagine being on the run, having dogs and people after you, tracking you down, and next thing you know, you are passed out and you wake up and you don't know what happened. And so she was able to overcome that. And so I always wondered, knowing this, how the movie would depict this. And in the movie, they depict this as a message from God. And so when she would pass out, she would get a vision. It's almost as if she had a sixth sense or so much. So even though this was a supernatural approach to the film, I don't feel it detracts from it because we're looking at it through her eyes. And I know some people will look at this from a theological standpoint and saying, hey, God doesn't speak to us anymore. I get that. In fact, I agree with that there is not that sort of audible communication. But I think the Spirit does lead. And if you take that and give liberty to the writers in this film, I think it honors her because she would do stand-up routines after the fact, obviously, where she would do a one-woman show and go through her whole experiences, and people would go and pay to hear Harriet Tubman talk about the stories. And she would use her faith in God and how God directed her in the most critical times of her journeys and how he delivered her many times. And so there's a lesson in that, right? That walking by faith is a doctrine that Christians should live by. And so the two elements of God and guns is something that is definitely counterculture. And I'm surprised that the media has not really come down on this. I guess because it's a black film with black actors and actresses, and it's such a sensitive subject on slavery that they just don't want to touch that. But I'm telling you right now, there's people that do not like the fact that she was so pro-God and she was so pro-gun, because you see how those two elements helped her do what she did. And without those elements, it was not possible. So it makes it very difficult for a person who is an SJW to reconcile those differences. And so I'm going to say this film is an absolute go for people to see. You know, there's nothing really negative about it from that standpoint. In fact, it's an absolute positive. It's a message for people today, particularly Black Americans, to say, hey, you know, if you have the determination, if you have the desire, if you have the faith in God, and you won't take no for an answer, you can overcome any situation. Obviously, it takes help, but you have to have that initiative. But you can't think of yourself as a victim, because if you do that, then you have a automatic slave mentality. And we see this in the film. We see people who just don't want to go. And that's okay, because each person, each family had to make that decision for themselves, because there was an inherent risk to running away. So just because you don't run away doesn't mean you're some sort of sellout. I'm not trying to say that. What I'm saying is that you don't have to be a victim. There are people who were slaves who didn't run away, who didn't see themselves as victims. They just chose not to run away. But those who did had the extra layer of courage to do so, and they need to be commended for. And people up today should see that if you just have that gumption and that desire, that faith in God, and the ability to understand that you're not a victim, that is something that is a message that I think many, many Americans can benefit from, and it's something that's absolutely counterculture to what we're seeing today. So for my final review, I give Harriet a 14 out of 20, which translates to 3 stars, and I give this film an absolute go for my conservative take. It's a wonderful film. It does not try to be what it's not. It doesn't go over the top with set pieces and so forth to try to be an Oscar cinematic movie. No, it just tells the story and does it in a tasteful way, and I really appreciate that. It's a throwback film to other eras where we can say things and do things which are not so politically correct. And so with that, I give this film a go, 3 stars. Check it out. So the important thing is, what do you think? Did you see Harriet? Do you want to see Harriet? Are you concerned that the film may be too intense for young viewers? If so, send me an instant message and I will talk to you about it. But I think if you have a child who's at least 11 years old, you should be good to go. Maybe even younger, depending on how mature they are. But again, there's no blood, there's no direct violence. You do see some scarring, you see some potential breakup of families, but that is the extent of it. The emotional impact is going to be what you're going to be most concerned with when it comes to children and yourself, for that matter. So yeah, so let me know in the comments below. I'd be curious to know. And if you like the content on this channel where I take culture, TV, and movies, and I filter it right, please click that like and subscribe button, that bell icon, and share it with your friends. And as always, please check out some video content that I have right here.